I'll just open our night in prayer. Our great and awesome God in heaven above, we come before you now so thankful for all of your blessings, for looking after each one of us as we went about our individual lives, and now for bringing us safely together as a group of fellow believers, of people that are united by a hope in your Son. And we thank you so much for this opportunity we have to come aside from distractions and to spend a night together to study your word, to study the characters of old, and particularly tonight, Priscilla and Aquila. We ask that you'd be with those who can't be with us, and please be with Mark as he teaches us. Might he open our hearts and our minds to something new and something inspiring. So we leave our night in your care and ask this through your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. I think, Mark, you can come straight up. Actually, does everyone have a worksheet before that? Yes? Perfect. Thanks, Mark.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's nice to be here tonight, looking at, as we've got on the screen, Priscilla and Aquila, hopefully over the next 2 nights, God willing. So we want to start by make extraordinary impacts. Well, tonight we really want to focus on that when we look at this amazing story of Priscilla and Aquila. And as we look at these examples, we'll quickly discover that they were so much more than just tent makers. This was a power couple who didn't just talk about faith, they built it from the ground up. They weren't just Paul's co-workers, they were dynamic leaders who tirelessly worked profoundly and shaped the very foundations of the early ecclesia. And I guess some of this really ties into the work Simeon did over the last couple of weeks. But over the next 2 weeks, we really want to focus on the impact that Priscilla and Aquila made in the region. So, firstly, all stand up. Quick question. Okay. Oh, that was quick. Sit down if you think Aquila and Priscilla only occur twice in the Bible, mentioned twice. Okay. 3 times? 4 times? 5 times? It's actually 6. So since you didn't know, now's the chance to have a look and just on your tables, see if you can identify the 6 occurrences where Priscilla and Aquila are mentioned. There's 6. Let's see who's the first table to find them all. Okay. Okay, how are we going? Excellent. Okay, how are we going? All done? Okay. So what are they? Just yell them out. Yep, 3 times in Acts 18, correct? Yes. Yep, Romans. And where was the last one? Correct. So these are the 6 references here. And over the 2 nights, we're going to go through them all. Tonight, we're just going to focus on the first 2, and then we'll look at the next 4 next week, God willing. So when we look at these references to Priscilla and Aquila, it is interesting how often their names pop up in the New Testament. And in some cases, they even occur before Paul. And I think that's a clue in itself that really points how central these 2 were right from the very beginning. They were really both instrumental in the spreading of the truth in the region. They were actively involved in not only establishing, but growing and sustaining the early ecclesias. And they did so in important cities like Rome, Corinth, and Ephesus. And their dedication wasn't just unwavering. They really made a powerful impact. They were both an active force that made an undeniable, lasting impact on the spreading of the good news. And when we look at their journey, it all really begins in the city of Rome. And now if we go to our first reference, if we get maybe Oscar's table to read Acts 18, verse 1 to 3, since there are 3 of you on the table.
Because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and they worked together. By trade, they were tent makers.
Great. So when we look at this verse, what does it tell us about who Aquila was? What are some of the things about Aquila it mentions? He was a Jew, correct? Where did he come from? Pontus, which is modern-day Turkey, correct? Seems to have always been mentioned with his wife. And what was their trade? They were tent makers. And so what we find then is in this story, we're told that, or how Priscilla and Aquila really came to be in Corinth at the time when Paul was there. And we just want to just look at that incident here now.
Today, we're taking a closer look at the command issued by Emperor Claudius, ordering all Jews to leave Rome.
All right, let's jump right in then. For many people listening, the most familiar reference probably comes from the Bible.
I'd say so. The book of Acts, chapter 18, verse 2, that's usually the starting point.
Okay, and what does that say?
Well, that's where we hear about the Apostle Paul arriving in Corinth.
Right.
And he meets Aquila and Priscilla there. The text explains they had recently come from Italy because
here it is.
Claudius had commanded all the Jews to depart from Rome.
Wow. So right away, you see this major imperial decree hitting early Christian figures directly.
Absolutely. Forcing them out of the capital, making them relocate elsewhere in the empire.
But this wasn't just, something recorded in a religious text. Roman historians were aware of this too.
Oh, definitely. The expulsion is corroborated by Roman writers, which gives us that crucial outside perspective.
And maybe the most famous one is Suetonius. He wrote biographies of the emperors.
Exactly. His Life of Claudius has a really key line.
The one that sparks a lot of debate.
That's the one. In section 5.4, Suetonius writes that Claudius, quote, expelled the Jews from Rome because they constantly made disturbances at the instigation of Crassus.
That just jumps out. What what do scholars generally make of that name?
It's hugely significant. The consensus, really, the strong consensus among scholars,
Yeah.
is that Cressus is almost certainly a reference to Christus, Christ.
So Suetonius, maybe not knowing all the details?
Right, writing from a Roman perspective, maybe hearing reports,
Mhm.
he seems to be identifying the source of these disturbances he mentions.
So he's saying the unrest, the disturbances, were specifically linked to Christ, or disputes about Christ.
That's the strong implication, yeah. It suggests that within the large Jewish community in Rome, there were disagreements, probably pretty heated ones,
Okay.
over the identity of Jesus. Was he the Messiah?
It caused friction.
Exactly. Theological debates spilling over into, well, visible unrest, arguments, maybe even riots.
Okay, so this wasn't just random trouble, it was potentially conflict within the Jewish community about this new movement.
Precisely. That's the picture you get when you combine the sources. You have early Jewish Christians proclaiming Jesus as the Christ.
And traditional Jews rejecting that claim?
Right, leading to internal tensions, arguments, maybe public disorder that gets noticed by the authorities. Emperors were always worried about unrest in the capital. It's a huge city, lots of different groups. If disagreements within the Jewish community
Fueled by this Christ debate.
were escalating into actual public disturbances, riots even, Claudius would see that simply as a threat to stability.
So his concern wasn't theology, it was just keeping the peace on the streets.
Pretty much. He likely wasn't interested in the finer points of Jewish messianic debates. He just saw disruption, identified a group associated with it, and opted for a blunt solution. Get him out. Restore calm. Date isn't perfectly fixed. There's some scholarly debate.
Actually.
But the strongest evidence, especially when you track events and acts and the movements of people like Aquila and Priscilla,
Yeah.
it really points towards the expulsion happening.
You just throw a few words in and AI spits out a little conversation. But hopefully that gives you of the time, the context in which we find Aquila and Priscilla. And so when we look at the timeline, and again on the worksheet, there's a timeline here, we find that when we come to Acts 18, verse 1 to 3, Priscilla and Aquila move from Rome to Corinth, and as we heard, that occurred in AD 49. And so we set the scene there with Priscilla and Aquila here leaving Rome, being expelled from Rome, knowing that they had to go somewhere. And that somewhere took them on a trip from Rome to Corinth. They were able to and set themselves up. Their forced departure wasn't just a personal hardship, but really a catalyst that propelled them to spreading the good news of the gospel right across the Roman Empire. And as we mentioned, they arrived here in Corinth, where they soon encountered the Apostle Paul. And that meeting would profoundly shape the future of their ministry and the spread of the gospel. So when we think about what we've read in Acts 1 to 3, there's probably a couple of key insights we want to pull out. The first one of those is it was a forced relocation. As we said, the displacement that occurred to them was because of Claudius's edict, which highlights the significant challenges that early believers were faced with due to political and social upheaval. And literally because of that, they were forced to move and to go to Corinth. And when we reflect about that key insight, that significant challenge of them being forced to be displaced, we really can't help but think that it was a providential displacement. The circumstance we already are aware of, but in terms of the providence, we see that they were forced to relocate to Corinth, where they were providentially met by the Apostle Paul. And had they not been expelled from Rome, their paths might never have crossed in such a significant way, thus demonstrating how God can use adverse circumstances for good. And perhaps, Tom, if we could get you to read this on the screen, that'd be great. Just again, just talking about God's providence in this situation.
God's providence in our lives is the constant, quiet, yet powerful way He guides and sustains us, orchestrating circumstances, relationships. Just as a master weaver works threads into an intricate pattern, God is continuously at work, using every part of our journey, our joys, our struggles, our gifts, and our choices, to draw us closer to Him and advance His goodwill in the world, even when we can't see it all the time.
Great. So we can see from the first key insight the providence and hand of God at work in the lives of Priscilla and Aquila. As they left Rome, they came to Corinth, and we can see that that was such a massive turning point for them. This forced move wasn't just random. It was God's plan at work, turning a tough situation into a perfect opportunity for something new. Turning point in the life of Priscilla and Aquila. And so we think about their trust in God, that through constant upheaval, Priscilla and Aquila profoundly trusted God, letting His guidance shape their every move and ministry. Their selfless giving and courage in danger were rooted in an unshakable belief in His provision and protection. And so we really see that in these amazing people, in both Priscilla and Aquila, despite the circumstances that they were thrown in, they were able to have this belief, this trust in God that He would be with them. Very similar to Abraham when he had to. Trusting God means letting go of our own limited understanding and leaning on His steady guidance, especially when life feels uncertain. It's the confidence assurance that He'll provide for our needs and orchestrate every situation for our good, empowering us to overcome fear and act with divine wisdom. And so we see already two lessons around the providence of God in our lives, and also to be able to trust in God. And again, as we reflect upon this providence at work, we see that Paul, having arrived at Corinth, looks for these or finds these tent makers. And when we look at the word finds, as if indicate that he stumbled across Priscilla and Aquila. But again, their shared trade, although not explicitly their shared faith, immediately connected them with Paul, forming a deep personal and professional bond. And really, this was God's hand at work. And so as we think about that, we can think about that situation where there's Paul, there's Priscilla, Aquila as tent makers. And what an amazing environment that was for all three of them to be able to work and talk together. And as we think about that situation for the moment where Paul, we're told, found Aquila and Priscilla as tent makers, just something to think in your group. Priscilla and Aquila already followers of Jesus when they encountered Paul in Corinth. So thinking about it, they all moved to Corinth. Paul came there and happened to find Priscilla and Aquila. The question is, were they already followers of Jesus when Paul encountered them? just have a little chat about that amongst yourselves and see what you can come up with for an answer. Okay, you finished? Okay, so just some thoughts around what people thought about that question. Who thinks they were followers of Jesus when Paul encountered them? Peter does. And why do you think that? Yep. Yep. Okay, that's a start. What other evidence in there that perhaps indicates they were already followers of Jesus?
I don't know how long there is between, but in verse 26 it says that it's sort of around the side of Apollos and talking Black River.
Yep.
Really have some understanding of what was going on.
Yes. Good. Yep. I think so. So certainly what we do know is the Bible doesn't explicitly state that their conversion status at all in this first meeting, but I think you're right. It does sound as though that they were already converted. One, they were all expelled from Rome, and as followers of Jesus, they were amongst the Jews that had to leave because of the unrest around Christ. Their conversion isn't mentioned. The fact that Luke's account doesn't record their conversion when they met Paul suggests, again, that they were already believers. And as Shem indicated, that the fact of the meeting with Apollos, and they were able to capably correct him at that time, again, sort of indicates it had a strong understanding, as well as what Peter mentioned as well. So it does seem that they were already converted. And nevertheless, we have this amazing situation where one's trade or possession, or profession rather, can be a powerful integrated component of one's ministry. And it really encourages us to view our daily work not just as a means to an end, but as a sphere or opportunity to actively witness and service. And so Priscilla and Aquila here in Ephesus would prove instrumental for the development and strengthening of the ecclesia in that region, further illustrating their dedication and mission to Christ at this time. And so again, as we think about this, Again, another key insight is that their tent makers or their tent making trade demonstrates the practical, self-supporting nature of early believers. And then the third insight that we want to just focus on is this immediate hospitality. We're told in the verses that they promptly welcome Paul, a fellow believer, into their home and work, showcasing their generous spirit. And so it was that here were Paul, Priscilla, Aquila, together tent making in the city of Corinth, going about establishing and growing a presence of the truth in that region as they went about establishing the ecclesia and spreading the good news of the gospel. And as we think about these key insights, particularly these last two, our third lesson around this is the focus on hospitality, and particularly the way in which Priscilla and Aquila immediately showed this generous spirit of hospitality. They didn't just offer Paul a place to stay. They welcomed him directly into their home, and they even shared their tent-making trade. And again, there's a few quotes to note with that. But more importantly, true faith is demonstrated through practical acts of self-sacrificial generosity and joyful hospitality towards both fellow believers and strangers, recognising that in doing so we serve Christ himself. And that last paragraph really summarises the sentiments in those quotes and really focus on this amazing spirit of hospitality that Priscilla and Aquila were able to show towards Paul, who had come to Corinth. And it appears as though Paul was there for a period of time, perhaps up to about 18 months. And so now as we think about these verses, there are perhaps three questions, again, to start thinking about in your groups. You can look at all three or one or two of them, but here are the questions. Firstly, think about how did the challenging circumstances of forced relocation shape Priscilla and Aquila's adaptability and resilience as early believers? Maybe a bit of a mouthful, but again, think about those key lessons that we started to focus on. Secondly, how did Priscilla and Aquila shared vocation work with the tent making actively support and build the early ecclesia? And thirdly, what can we learn about hospitality and support in the early ecclesia from Paul's relationship with Priscilla and Aquila? So again, 5 minutes or thereabouts, just amongst your groups, talk about one, two, or three of those, and then we'll come back and look at a few answers to each of those questions. Okay, we'll have a quick look at some responses to these 3 questions. Did anyone have any thoughts around the first question? Any thoughts or ideas around the first question? Yes? Yep. Build their trust in God. I've got a few prompts here. I thought quick to adjust. They didn't just sit around feeling sorry for themselves when they were in Corinth, but they got on with the work.
They continued following Paul as well afterwards.
Correct. Yep. Very good. Yep. This sort of never give up attitude that, again, just because they were uprooted, didn't stop their faith at all. They continued. And they were really ready for anything. It didn't matter. They saw a fresh city as a new opportunity to begin preaching. And they were really willing to go wherever God needed them. Okay, what about the second question?
The answer to that was a few chapters over, Acts 20, verse 33 to 35.
Yep.
So basically he says that he hasn't coveted anyone's gold or silver, but with his hands he was able to provide the necessity of those that were written and support the weak as well.
Perfect, correct. And that's certainly what I had there, this ability to be able to stand on their own and do that. Correct. I thought too, just naturally working side by side, also, is another opportunity to develop friendships, not just amongst themselves, but anyone they work with. So again, I saw that, as well as trust and truth and faith and work as one. So the opportunity to really work together in that environment. And what about the third question? Around hospitality and support.
Mark, in Acts 18 verse 18, it says that, and we know that Paul travelled a lot,
Yep.
but it says there that he sailed into Syria and with him Priscilla and Aquila.
Yep.
So that hospitality and that work together built trust and bond. And Paul needed support, he needed others with him.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting that Priscilla and Aquila are noted as travelling with Paul as he went into Syria, which would have been a big trip. You need people around the time.
Absolutely. And I know since you referenced that, that's where we're about to go in a minute, so I need to fly and get to that one. But yeah, certainly some of the ideas I had there were certainly around that as well, fueling the mission, spotting true faith, faith in action, etc. You know, to be able to provide that support, that generosity in action was really amazing and really helps build that bond in the truth, making strangers really feel like family. And it's a wonderful blessing we're able to do in that situation. So as Tim alluded to, let's jump to Acts 18, which is the second reference to Aquila and Priscilla. And I'm not sure where we got up to, but maybe, Ollie, if we get you to read verse 18.
After this, Paul stayed many days longer, and having quickly on his brothers, and set sail for Syria, and with him Priscilla and Aquila.
Great. So small verse, but a very, very important. Now, hopefully, in terms of the worksheets, page 1 is now finished. Page 2 has started. And here we have the second reference in Acts 18, verse 18 and 19. And here we find that following their time in Corinth, Paul now decides to sail to Syria. It's about a 300-kilometre journey. And in doing so, Priscilla and Aquila, he decides to take with them. And so here they are boarding the ship in Corinth, and from there travelling the journey to the city of Ephesus. And once we get there, we read in verse 19, and they came to Ephesus, and no sooner had they got there, and Paul leaves them there while he continued on to the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. And so here we find that they're left in Ephesus, which was, we know from Sim's talks over the last couple of weeks, was a really important city in the Roman province of Asia. And it was here that Paul left them. And Paul left them, entrusting them with a continuation of the ministry in that city. And so we see that they come off the boat, they find accommodation and begin to settle into the city there in Ephesus. And when we look at the timeline, again, back to the first page, we see that this happens a little bit after AD 52, or actually just in AD 52 there, where Paul, or rather Priscilla and Aquila, now arrive in the city of Ephesus. And in terms of key insights here, we see this importance of valued companionship, where Paul decides to bring Priscilla and Aquila with him because he saw them as valued companions and essential for spreading the gospel in that area. And so we see that Priscilla and Aquila were more than just tent makers, and they weren't just ordinary believers either. They were people who were dynamic. They were really active participants in sharing the gospel message, both far and wide. And this means that they were always ready and willing to follow God's call, even if it meant uprooting their lives and moving from one city to another. And so we see the emphasis here in terms of lessons really around this idea of partnership or co-workers. And even despite the fact they had to move, Priscilla and Aquila showcase a wonderful example or a powerful partnership integrating their domestic life, trade, and ministry. Their collaborative efforts were steadfast, and they really got behind and supported Paul. And they were really willing to risk everything to really show that immense dedication to God's purpose. And again, we've got a few quotes there, but when we think about those quotes in summary, what we really learn is that we flourish and achieve our purpose by actively partnering and mutually sharpening and strengthening each other as co-workers in God's plan, rather than working alone. And that's really what we start to see here from this work of Priscilla and Aquila and Paul, but in particular, this partnership that is really developing and enabling Priscilla and Aquila to achieve a lot in the region. And so again, when we think back to key insights, we think about their unwavering dedication. This ability of Priscilla and Aquila, despite being uprooted yet again, their willingness to give up what they had and to travel with Paul. And so dedicated and committed were they to the gospel that they really saw the advancement of that throughout this Asia region. And so in terms of lessons, when we think about the key insight, we really think about their commitment to the truth, their commitment together as a couple who made the truth their life and were committed to the service of Christ, together with the Apostle Paul. And so we see, again from these quotes, that commitment isn't just following rules. It's a vibrant, it's willing and purposeful dedication of our entire being and all our resources to God's plan. It's fueled by a deep trust in who God is and who He's promised, leading to both tangible blessings here on earth and lasting rewards in eternity. And so hopefully what you're starting to really realise when we look at the lives of Priscilla and Aquila, that they were really more than just tent makers. They consistently prioritised the preaching of the truth. They demonstrated amazing dedication on getting things done wherever they ended up. They looked for opportunities to help. They looked for opportunities to spread the gospel message so it was able to take root and to flourish, whether it was Rome, whether it was Corinth, or whether it was in Ephesus. And so we see the gospel, because of their efforts, spreading beyond geographical boundaries. And in particular, their presence in Ephesus was particularly providential as it was preparing the ground for Paul's extensive ministry in that region. And so Priscilla and Aquila were able to establish their home as a centre of worship. And that's what they were able to do there in Ephesus. They were able to use their home as a meeting place, open it up to anyone who wanted to come in and learn more about the good news of God's kingdom and the name of Jesus Christ. And so here we have them pictured in their homes, talking through those things. And so our last set of questions for tonight, hopefully you got the two key insights, you got the two lessons, and really we just want to finish off by just considering these last three questions, which are as follows. Why did Paul choose to leave Priscilla and Aquila, his valued companions in Ephesus? And why did he journey on? What kind of ministry did Priscilla and Aquila, with their strong dedication, carry out in Ephesus once Paul left? And how did Priscilla and Aquila's work in Ephesus fit into Paul's overall plan to spread Christianity across Asia Minor? So just have a think about those amongst your groups. And see what you come up with. Okay, we'll start to bring things to a close. So just quickly, in relation to the first question, any thoughts as to why Paul decided to leave Priscilla and Aquila in Ephesus?
I think it kind of links, question 1 and 3 kind of link together through what we talked about. Acts 18 verse 24 to 26 really, where Apollos is a really passionate person.
Yep.
Who may not have been teaching the exact right things, but in verse 26 it says, he began to speak boldly in the synagogue when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. So it's like he was almost going around to these places and setting up like a rock that
Yes.
like, would be able to ground the ecclesia once he had left them.
Yep,
So
I think that's spot on. And we'll see more of that next time. Correct. So yeah, definitely around location. They were his what I call trusted all-stars, so to speak. Like you said, they were really laying that groundwork and really setting up that foundation for him. But also too, I think because he was able to trust them and leave them behind, it allowed Paul to continue his journey where he wanted to get to his home ecclesia and again report back to them on what had happened. What about the second question around their dedication? So what do you think they were doing?
We know from 1 Corinthians 16 that they became almost like a family figure for the ecclesia because they had the ecclesia in their house.
Yep.
Paul goes to the effort of highlighting that, and that fits pretty nicely with what Paul experienced with them in Corinth. So like their hospitality and care for the ecclesia and members of the ecclesia.
Absolutely. Yep. And again, we'll find that evident in next week, just the amazing work they did in being able to do that. So that's good. And as Riley alluded to, the third question was very similar to the first. In fact, I thought I'd deleted it, but it's still there. So that's good. So when we think about then key takeaways, what are the 5 key takeaways from tonight? Lessons, takeaways, I guess they could be the same. Without looking, what's the first one? Trust, yes. Good, so trust. What's the second one? Hospitable, yes. That's the third one, but yes, it's still one, so that's good. Hospitable. Second one was around providence, then hospitality, and then the last 2 was really around partnership, correct? And then finally, commitment. So again, when we look at the lives of these amazing 2 people, already in the couple of references that we've looked at, there are amazing lessons to be learned. And we can certainly see that both Priscilla and Aquila were really more than just tent makers. And we see that evident in the lives by the trust, by allowing God to work in their lives, by recognizing that and being hospitable, supportive, despite circumstances, going out to preach the truth, and really as co-workers working together with that commitment and dedication to seeing that truth spread throughout the region. And then hopefully next week, God willing, we'll continue that story. Thanks.
it's dead. I'll speak really loud. Well, thanks very much, Mark, for an awesome first night on Priscilla and Aquila. We very much look forward to the next few references next week. I love the structured approach. It's really beneficial to me. I'm sure to everyone else. I'll just quickly open it up to for the welfare prayer, any other requests? If you think about those as we just go through. Is there any announcements for the week as well, other than the memorial on Sunday? All right, no worries. I'll just close our night in a prayer then. God in heaven above, we come before you again as fellow believers, so thankful for this opportunity that we've had tonight to come around your word for your word in general, for the amazing lessons that it provides us, for allowing us to hear the disciples from the past, and particularly tonight for looking at Paul and his work with Priscilla and Aquila. We thank you so much for their amazing example as disciples who trusted in you no matter their circumstances, and they saw you working in their lives. We ask that you would help us to have that same mentality, to see your providence, to see you working in our own individual lives and with us here at Burnside. We also thank you for the amazing family that we have here and for the opportunity that we have to spend time together, to be hospitable towards one another here and also to those out in the world. Help us always to have open hearts to welcome people into our lives and to be friendly and hospitable to them. We also thank you for the partnership that we have here together, that we can work to spread your gospel to the world around us and to build each other up, to be co-workers in your plan. So we think of those who cannot be with us tonight for various reasons, and please might you strengthen them, be with them. We also think of those who do not have the opportunity at all to study your word like we do, or even to meet together like they could in Priscilla and Aquila's house. We think of those in countries that are really struggling at the moment, particularly in the Middle East, as there's a lot of chaos going on. And we know that this is all part of your plan, and help us to be there for people in whatever way we possibly can. And please might you strengthen them and help them to see you working in their lives. We once again thank you for the opportunity we have tonight to spend together, and now for the food particularly. We ask for your Son's soon return, where he'll bring peace to the earth and we can rejoice together in your kingdom. And it's through him that we now pray to you, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.